The 1975 cold case of a Maryland woman was finally solved with the help of an old cassette tape and a photo of the victim. On August 24, 1975, 20-year-old Roseann Sturtz was strangled after meeting someone at TikTok Club on Utah Street in downtown Baltimore, Maryland. A relative reported her missing later that evening. Her body was found 4 months later, in December, in a wooded area of Columbia. The case was a mystery for decades until the Howard County Police revived it 49 years after the crime, in late 2024. They uncovered evidence that a convicted perpetrator, already in prison, had committed the crime. The detectives discovered a 1981 audio tape in which Charles William Davis Jr., then incarcerated at Jessup Correctional Institute, was asked about the case in exchange for not facing charges. In 1981, Davis could not identify Roseann, who went by Ann, as one of his victims after he was shown a photo taken of her several years before the crime took place. Davis landed on the authorities' radar in 1981 after the police studied his confirmed victims and compared them to Roseann. But Howard County Police Corporal Wade Zufel then brought Davis from the same jail to the police headquarters in 2024 to interview him again 44 years later. He showed Davis a later photo of Roseann, a headshot taken a month before her life was ended. This time, he identified her as one of his victims and admitted to the slaying. Footage released from the interview shows Davis nodding his head as he took a look at the photo. Roseann's family said the following in a statement through the police department. In November 2024, we were grateful to have all the case details, learned Roseann's actual date of demise, and received the closure we have been praying for all these years. Finally put to rest the answers we never had. 77-year-old Davis told the police that after meeting Roseann at a bar, the pair got into an argument before he took her life. Davis cannot be charged in this case, but he is already in prison for life for other crimes. Corporal Zufel said, "His main reason why he wanted to talk to me was he wanted to give closure to the family." The case was finally declared solved 5 decades later in March 2025. On the night of July 27, 2001 in Missouri, a devoted mother and wife vanished without a trace after telling her daughter she was heading to the store. The case was initially linked to a notorious serial offender, but the breakthrough would only happen more than 2 decades later. Carol Hemphill was born on June 10, 1962. At 39 years old, she was married and the proud mother of 2 daughters. On the night of July 27, 2001, in St. Louis, Missouri, she told her daughter that she was heading to the store but never returned. There were no initial signs of trouble, making the situation even more puzzling. As the hours turned into days, Carol's family grew increasingly worried. They reported her missing to the authorities, hoping for any leads that could explain her sudden vanishing. The police launched an investigation, speaking to friends, family, and local store employees to gather any possible information. However, there were no witnesses who could confirm seeing Carol after she left her home that night. Her car was also unaccounted for. Her family tirelessly searched for answers, distributing flyers, and pleading with the public for any information. Local news stations covered her case, amplifying the urgency of her disappearance. Despite their efforts, there were no immediate breakthroughs. Law enforcement suspected that Carol had fallen victim to Maury Troy Travis, a notorious serial offender. Travis was linked to multiple crimes in the St. Louis area, preying on vulnerable women and torturing his victims in his home. Given the circumstances of Carol's disappearance, the authorities believed that there was a strong possibility that she had been one of his victims. However, without definitive proof, they could not confirm the connection at the time. Carol's husband revealed that Travis was not a stranger to their community. He was a familiar figure in the neighborhood where their family lived, making the possibility of his involvement even more unsettling. Adding to the growing concerns, Carol's daughter recalled that a close acquaintance of a family member had seen Travis in their area. Travis is believed to have ended the lives of between 12 and 20 women across Missouri and Illinois between 2000 and 2002. However, despite the overwhelming evidence found in his home, including torture videos and maps of possible burial sites, Travis never admitted to any of the crimes. Before the authorities could press charges for all the suspected crimes, Travis took his own life. On June 10, 2002, while being held at the St. Louis County Jail in Clayton, Missouri, he hanged himself in his cell at the age of 36. His passing robbed many families of the chance to confront him in court and receive direct answers about their loved ones. And the case of Carol went cold. Nearly 8 months after Carol Hemphill's disappearance, a grim discovery was made. On March 28, 2002, Illinois Department of Transportation, IDOT workers, stumbled upon human remains in a creek bed along Route 3 near Gall Road in Columbia, Illinois. The authorities launched an investigation, but were initially unable to determine the identity of the remains. With no immediate forensic leads, the case remained open as the investigators worked to uncover the truth. 2 decades later, in 2022, a breakthrough opportunity emerged when a grant provided funding for genetic genealogy research. This innovative approach, which had helped solve other cold cases, offered new hope for identifying the remains. As part of this effort, portions of the remains were sent to a specialized lab at the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification. Scientists at the facility worked to extract viable DNA, with the goal of connecting her genetic profile to potential relatives. In late October 2024, a major breakthrough finally came in Carol Hemphill's case. After years of uncertainty, a lab report revealed a close genetic connection between the remains and a DNA sample from her deceased biological son. This critical finding brought new hope that her identity could finally be confirmed. To strengthen the results, living family members were asked to submit their own DNA for further comparison, ensuring the most accurate identification possible. Months of detailed forensic analysis followed, as scientists worked to verify the match. Finally, on February 24, 2025, the final lab results conclusively confirmed that the remains discovered in the creek bed over 2 decades earlier belonged to Carol Hemphill. On March 14, 2025, the Columbia Police Department publicly announced the official identification of Carol. The confirmation was a significant development in a case that had remained unsolved for nearly 24 years. The authorities continued to suspect that Carol was a victim of Maury Troy Travis, given the timeline of her disappearance and the proximity of her remains to areas associated with him. However, without a direct confession or definitive physical evidence linking him to this crime, law enforcement could not close the case. Katricia Hemphill, Carol's daughter, said, "It is a bittersweet moment. It means a lot. It still hurts pretty bad. I have been waiting for this day for a long time." She said these words while holding something she has longed for, her mother's ashes, a tangible piece of the woman she has spent decades searching for. Along with them, the memories that time could never erase. She said, "God finally answered all my prayers." But in her mind, it is not over yet. She explained, "I definitely want justice. This is just halfway. We are not at the end until justice is served. For whoever it is, they did whatever they did. I want justice. And I know these guys, they're going to keep working on it." Ricky Hemphill, Carol's husband, who is now 63 and now lives in Houston, said that he went to lay down after dinner on the night his wife was last seen by loved ones. He was 18 when he first met his wife and said she was a loving person. He said everybody loved her and she loved everybody. She really was an open person. She was a happy person. She was a wonderful woman. In 1997, in Sasakwa, Oklahoma, 81-year-old Gerthie Carolina was found lifeless on her kitchen floor, the victim of a vicious attack. What appeared to be a random act of violence against an elderly woman soon revealed a web of financial greed, betrayal, and shocking confessions. Gerthie Carolina was born in 1918 and lived a long, fulfilling life. At 81 years old, she resided in Sasakwa, Oklahoma, where she had spent most of her years. She was once married but later lost her husband, leaving her to navigate life alone. Despite never having children of her own, she found immense joy in her extended family and was deeply connected to the people in her community. As the years passed, Gerthie became increasingly aware that her time on Earth was limited. She wanted to ensure that her affairs were in order before she passed away. Understanding the importance of a legal will and trust, she carefully considered her options. After much thought, she made the decision to transfer ownership of her property to her niece, Carolyn Foreman, and her grandniece, Dakota Davis. It was her wish that after she was gone, the two would inherit everything she had worked hard for. However, what she believed was a responsible and loving decision would ultimately lead to devastating consequences. By signing over her assets, Gerthie unknowingly set off a chain of events that would forever alter the course of her life. She trusted that her family would honor her wishes and care for her as she lived out her final years. Unfortunately, what followed was far from what she had envisioned. On August 11, 1997, just 4 months after filing her will and trust, Gerthie was brutally attacked in her home. That afternoon, her niece, Carolyn Foreman, and her grandniece, Dakota Davis, who were 53 and 17 years old at the time, claimed to have arrived at Gerthie's home around 3:15 p.m. Their reason for visiting, they said, was to take her to a doctor's appointment, as she had not been feeling well. What they discovered instead was a horrific scene. Carolyn and Dakota alerted the police upon finding Gerthie's lifeless body on the kitchen floor, lying in a pool of blood. Law enforcement officers rushed to the scene, but by the time they arrived, it was too late. Gerthie was already deceased. An investigation was immediately launched, and the authorities worked to piece together what had happened. The autopsy report revealed that Gerthie's cause of demise was the result of multiple stab wounds, deep incisions, and severe blunt force trauma. The level of violence suggested an attack fueled by rage, leaving the investigators to question who could have committed such a brutal act against an elderly woman. The police interviewed friends, neighbors, and family members, hoping to uncover any clues that might lead to her perpetrator. However, no clear suspects emerged, and the investigation soon faced obstacles. As the months turned into years, Gerthie's case remained unsolved. In 2023, after 26 years of unanswered questions, Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, OSBI agents, decided to re-examine the evidence in Gerthie's case. Advances in forensic technology allowed them to revisit key pieces of evidence that had gone untested for years. Among these items was a shoe collected from the crime scene in 1997. Investigators focused on a blood stain found on the shoe, suspecting it might hold the breakthrough they had long been searching for. In early 2025, testing confirmed what authorities had suspected. The blood on the shoe belonged to Gerthie, and the forensic link pointed directly to Dakota, Gerthie's grandniece. With this undeniable evidence, the investigators finally had the proof they needed to bring charges against those responsible for this brutal crime. Shortly after the discovery, on March 5, 2025, law enforcement arrested both 45-year-old Dakota Davis and her mother, 81-year-old Carolyn Foreman. The two women were charged in the first degree and with conspiracy to take a person's life. The authorities revealed that over the years, multiple individuals had come forward with statements about Dakota's involvement in the crime. According to the affidavits, Dakota had admitted to the crime on several occasions. Some witnesses recalled her describing how she had used a machete to carry out the attack, while others stated that she claimed to have used an axe. The investigators believed that this inconsistency pointed to an attempt to minimize her responsibility or distort the details of the crime. The investigators uncovered even more damning evidence when Dakota's father came forward with shocking details about her past confessions. He recalled that in 2001, Dakota had admitted to ending the life of Gerthie, telling him that she had chopped up the victim. He also stated that Carolyn had been present during the attack, urging Dakota on by shouting, "Hit her again, hit her again." Further investigations revealed that financial greed had been the driving force behind this crime. According to the father's statement, Gerthie had grown increasingly upset before her end because she discovered that Carolyn had been withdrawing money from her bank account to cover personal expenses. Gerthie had always been careful with her finances, but as she aged, she became more dependent on those around her. Unfortunately, this vulnerability made her an easy target for exploitation. The financial motive became even clearer when the authorities traced Gerthie's assets. On August 25, 1996, just a year before her demise, she had purchased a $40,000 certificate of deposit. The following year, she transferred ownership of the CD to a living trust, naming Carolyn as the beneficiary. This decision, meant to secure her financial future, ultimately set the stage for her demise. Investigators believe that Foreman and Davis saw Gerthie as an obstacle standing between them and a large sum of money. Just days after the crime, Foreman wasted no time in cashing out the certificate of deposit. The timing was suspicious, reinforcing law enforcement's belief that the crime had been premeditated. Court documents said, Foreman had a gun, but Davis had an axe. When they arrived at Gerthie's home, Davis threw ammonia on Gerthie's face. Davis then began hitting Gerthie with the axe. Seminole County District Attorney Eric Johnson said in a statement, "This case is a testament to the relentless dedication of these investigators and our unwavering pursuit of justice, even decades after a crime is committed. We hope this brings some measure of peace to Gerthie Carolina's family after all these years." Foreman was previously charged with first-degree slaying in a separate case involving the 1999 shooting fatality of a teenager. However, the charge was later dismissed. Her son Billy Parker was then convicted of the crime in 2007. He is serving a life sentence. On the night of August 18, 1996, in Paris, Texas, Mary Moore Searight, a beloved community figure, was found inside her home, brutally assaulted, and left fighting for her life. Her case went cold as the detectives struggled to find answers, and the crime remained unsolved for nearly 30 years. Mary Moore Searight was born in 1910 in Paris, Texas. She was a proud native of Paris, but eventually relocated to the Austin, Texas area in 1939. It was there that she met her future husband, Dan Searight, an Austinite and the president of the Walter Tipps Hardware Company. Their union marked the beginning of a prosperous life together, one that allowed them to acquire several hundred acres of land in Austin. For nearly 30 years, they resided on their ranch, building a legacy that would later become an important part of Austin's history. Throughout her life, Mary showed a deep connection to her land and refused multiple offers to sell it. Even after Dan passed away in the 1950s, she remained steadfast in her vision, managing the land on her own. Developers approached her with multi-million-dollar deals, hoping to turn the property into commercial or residential developments, but she turned them all down. Her dedication ensured that a significant portion of her land remained untouched and preserved for future generations. This decision would later lead to the creation of the Mary Moore Searight Metropolitan Park, a lasting tribute to her generosity and commitment to conservation. Before leaving Austin, Mary made another selfless contribution. She sold approximately 88 acres of her land to the city of Austin, further reinforcing her desire to see the area remain undeveloped. The land she had protected was turned into a public park, allowing future generations to enjoy the open space she had fought to preserve. Even as she prepared to return to her hometown of Paris, she remained deeply respected and cherished by those who knew her. On the night of August 18, 1996, Mary was found inside her home, still alive, but in critical condition. Her unofficial caretaker, who regularly checked on her and brought her food, made the horrifying discovery. Mary had been indecently assaulted, brutally beaten and strangled. The caretaker, overcome with shock and fear, wasted no time in alerting the authorities. When law enforcement arrived at the scene, they found Mary unconscious, her frail body barely clinging to life. Emergency responders quickly transported her to a local hospital, where medical personnel fought to save her. Despite their best efforts, Mary's condition was too severe. The trauma she had endured had left her in an irreversible state. She remained unresponsive, and after 3 days of intensive medical care, she succumbed to her injuries. Mary was pronounced deceased. Following the grim discovery, detectives swarmed Mary's residence, determined to uncover the truth. The crime scene was meticulously examined, with law enforcement officials working late into the night and throughout the following day. They gathered physical evidence from the home, hoping it would provide crucial clues about the perpetrator. Every room was inspected, every item scrutinized. Investigators knew that solving this crime would require patience and precision. Several individuals were interviewed in connection with the case, including neighbors and potential witnesses. Among them was a man who told the detectives that he had seen Mary and had been at her house on the day of the attack. His statement was carefully examined, but it led nowhere concrete. The investigators remained frustrated by the lack of substantial leads. Despite their extensive questioning, none of the interviews provided a clear suspect or a motive. The case was proving to be more complex than anyone had anticipated. The physical evidence collected at the scene was sent to the Texas Department of Public Safety Crime Laboratory for thorough analysis. Detectives hoped that forensic testing would yield a breakthrough, but the results were disappointing. One of Mary Moore Searight's tenants, David Paul Caddy Jr., who was 25 years old at the time, became a person of interest early in the investigation. On the evening of the crime, he was among the neighbors questioned by the Paris Police Department. The detectives noted his behavior during the interview. He seemed nervous and attempted to conceal a laceration on his right hand. When asked about the injury, David provided inconsistent explanations, raising further suspicion. The investigators were eager to determine whether his wound was related to the attack on Mary. As part of their investigation, the detectives obtained DNA swabs from his hand. However, despite their efforts, the case did not move forward. At the time, forensic technology had limitations, and the results from the swabs failed to produce any major breakthroughs. With no conclusive evidence linking David or anyone else to the crime, the case grew colder. In 2021, nearly 25 years after Mary's life was ended, the case was re-examined by the Texas Rangers. It was identified as eligible for the Texas Department of Public Safety's DPS Assault Kit Initiative, SAKI program. This initiative, funded by the Department of Justice and the Bureau of Justice Assistance, was designed to provide funding and resources for law enforcement agencies across America. Its primary goal was to revisit and advance unsolved indecent assaults and other related cases, bringing justice to victims and closure to their families. Mary's case, long dormant, was given new life under this initiative. Investigators meticulously reviewed the original evidence, hoping that advancements in forensic technology would uncover information that had previously gone undetected. The hope was that modern DNA analysis techniques would succeed where older methods had failed. As law enforcement officials delved deeper, they reconsidered evidence that had once seemed inconclusive, determined to find the answers that had eluded them for decades. The investigators made a critical decision. The swabs taken from David Paul Caddy Jr.'s hand on the night of the crime were deemed eligible for further forensic analysis. This development reignited the case, giving the detectives renewed hope of solving the mystery surrounding Mary's end. Advanced testing confirmed what investigators had long suspected. Caddy's DNA was present on the evidence. This discovery provided the long-awaited link between him and the brutal attack on Mary. With this crucial piece of evidence, law enforcement officials moved swiftly to take action. The Texas Rangers, in collaboration with the Paris Police Department, formally arrested Caddy. At the time of his arrest, Caddy was already in custody at the Hopkins County Jail for an unrelated crime. His criminal past had kept him behind bars, but he faced far more serious charges now. The authorities wasted no time in transferring him into their custody, ensuring that he would be held accountable for the violent crime that had gone unsolved for so many years. While the case has taken a major step toward resolution, in January 2025, questions remain about what led to her tragic end, and the search for full justice continues.